Mars isn't impossible because we lack ambition or technology. It's impossible because the universe itself is hostile to human biology in ways we still can't solve. Before we dive into this topic, make sure to subscribe and comment where in the world you're watching from. Mars feels inevitable, almost boringly so, as if it's already scheduled, just waiting for the right launch window. We talk about it the way past generations talked about crossing the Atlantic or flying to the moon. Not if we go, but when. That sense of certainty didn't come from physics. It came from stories. For decades, Mars has been framed as the natural sequel to Apollo. First the moon, then Mars, then the stars. Science fiction locked that progression into our imagination long before the technology existed. Red deserts, domes on the horizon, humans walking confidently under a salmon-colored sky. By the time real space programs caught up, the narrative was already written. Mars wasn't a question. It was a destiny. Then came the modern amplifiers. Private space companies promising rockets that land themselves. Billionaires talking about becoming a multi-planet species. Timelines get thrown around casually. 10 years, 20 years, sometimes sooner. Each announcement reinforces the same assumption that Mars is just a harder engineering problem. Bigger rockets, better life support, more funding, solve those and the rest will follow. But that confidence is built on a quiet sleight of hand. We keep treating Mars like a place, a destination, a dot on a map we haven't reached yet. That framing is comforting because destinations feel conquerable. You can point to them, plan routes, build vehicles. Mars in that story is just far away. The reality is far less reassuring. Mars isn't a destination problem, it's a human survival problem. When we say go to Mars, what we're really saying is keep human beings alive in deep space, unprotected by Earth's magnetic field for years at a time, with no rescue, no resupply, and no margin for error. That is not a question of ambition, it's a question of biology and physics. The reason Mars feels inevitable is because we project past successes forward. We went to the moon with slide rules and 1960s computers, so surely Mars is just the next rung on the ladder. But progress in space doesn't scale that way. The moon was close enough to forgive mistakes. Mars is not. The moon let us pretend we understood the environment. Mars exposes how much we don't. Our belief in Mars is emotional. It's driven by momentum, pride, and the deeply human need to believe that progress always continues outward. Physics doesn't share that optimism. Biology doesn't care about our narratives, and the universe doesn't reward confidence. Mars feels inevitable because we want it to be, not because the conditions actually allow it. Distance is the first thing people underestimate about Mars, not because they don't know the numbers, but because they don't feel what those numbers mean. Mars isn't just the moon, but farther away. It's a different category of isolation altogether. The moon is 3 days from Earth. Mars is months. At its closest, it's tens of millions of kilometers away. At its farthest, hundreds of millions. That distance doesn't just stretch travel time, it breaks the entire safety model we've relied on for human spaceflight since the beginning. On the moon, Earth was always present. If something went wrong, there was at least a theoretical path home. Abort trajectories existed. Mission control could speak to astronauts almost in real time. Decisions were shared. Corrections could be discussed. Help, while limited, was conceptually possible. Mars removes that safety net completely. Communication alone rewrites the rules. At best, a signal between Earth and Mars takes several minutes one way. At worst, more than 20. That means every conversation is delayed. Every question is answered long after the moment has passed. In an emergency, astronauts can't ask what to do. They must already know. Mission control can't guide a landing, diagnose a failure, or talk someone through a repair. By the time Earth hears about a problem, it may already be over. Then there's the journey itself. A Mars mission isn't a sprint. It's a slow drift through deep space lasting 6 to 9 months each way. That's over a year outside Earth's protective environment before you even count time on the surface. During that entire period, the crew is unreachable in any meaningful sense. No rescue mission can catch up. No supply ship can be launched to intercept them. Physics doesn't allow it. Once you leave Earth orbit toward Mars, you've crossed a point of no return. Not philosophically, physically. Fuel constraints, Orbital mechanics and timing windows mean you cannot simply turn around. There is no comeback early option. Every system on board must survive the full mission by default, because there is no alternative. This is what makes Mars fundamentally different from everything humanity has ever attempted in space. It's not about bravery, it's about irreversibility. We've never sent humans on a mission where failure meant absolute isolation, guaranteed for years. Distance turns small problems into fatal ones. A faulty valve, a software error, a medical issue that would be manageable on Earth or in orbit. On Mars, those same problems unfold in silence. Mars isn't far in a geographic sense, it's far in a human sense, and that distance changes everything. Radiation is the problem most Mars discussions quietly step around, not because it's unknown, but because it's unsolved. Rockets can be built, computers can be upgraded, but radiation isn't an engineering inconvenience. It's a biological wall. On Earth, we live inside an invisible shield. The planet's magnetic field deflects charged particles from the sun and from deep space, funneling most of that radiation away from the surface. Our atmosphere does the rest, absorbing what the magnetic field misses. This is why life is possible here at all. Without those layers of protection, DNA breaks down, cells mutate, cancer becomes inevitable. The moment humans leave Earth orbit, that shield disappears. Deep space is saturated with high-energy particles moving at near light speed, cosmic rays from distant supernovae, solar radiation from the sun, and the most dangerous events of all, solar particle events, sudden eruptions that can flood space with lethal doses of radiation in hours. These aren't hypothetical, they happen regularly. On Earth, we barely notice them. In deep space, they can kill. Apollo astronauts passed through radiation belts, but the exposure was brief, days, not months. Their missions were short enough that cumulative dose stayed within survivable limits. Mars is different. A round-trip mission would expose astronauts to radiation continuously for years. There is no safe pause, no shelter to retreat into. This is where the uncomfortable truth appears. Shielding radiation is not just about intelligence, it's about mass. To block high-energy cosmic rays effectively, you need thick, dense material. Water helps, lead helps, rock helps, but every kilogram you add to a spacecraft makes it exponentially harder to launch, maneuver, and land. Enough shielding to truly protect humans would require mass on a scale we cannot realistically send to Mars. There is no miracle material waiting to be discovered that changes this equation. This isn't a lack of funding problem, it's a physics problem. High-energy radiation passes through most metals easily, producing secondary radiation that can make exposure worse. You can reduce dose. You cannot eliminate it. That means a Mars crew would accumulate radiation damage the entire time. Increased cancer risk, neurological damage, degeneration of organs over time. And that's assuming no major solar storm hits them directly. Radiation doesn't make Mars impossible because it kills instantly. It makes Mars impossible because it degrades humans slowly, relentlessly, and predictably. You can't train for it. You can't power through it. Biology doesn't negotiate. We can engineer machines to survive Mars. We have not yet learned how to engineer humans to do the same. Even if radiation weren't an issue, the human body itself would still be the limiting factor. We are not designed for space. We are designed for one very specific environment, one gravity, one pressure, one set of biological assumptions that have been locked in by millions of years of evolution. The moment those assumptions change, the body begins to break down. In microgravity, the effects are immediate and measurable. Bones stop carrying weight, so the body begins to reabsorb them. Astronauts lose bone density at a rate that would be considered severe osteoporosis on Earth. Muscles, no longer fighting gravity, atrophy rapidly despite hours of daily exercise. The heart weakens because it no longer has to pump blood upward. Even the immune system becomes confused, reactivating dormant viruses and reducing the body's ability to fight infection. Vision is another silent casualty. In space, fluids shift upward, increasing pressure inside the skull. This can flatten the eyeballs and damage the optic nerve, causing permanent vision impairment. NASA still doesn't fully understand why this happens or why some astronauts are affected more than others. What we do know is that these changes can persist long after returning to Earth. Then there are the neurological effects. The brain adapts to a world without up and down, rewiring itself to handle movement and balance differently. That adaptation helps astronauts function in orbit, but it comes at a cost. When they return to gravity, many struggle to walk, to stand, even to think clearly for a period of time. The brain has to relearn how to exist on a planet. Mars complicates this problem in a way we've never tested. Its gravity is about 38% of Earth's, not enough to fully load bones and muscles, but enough to prevent the body from settling into a true microgravity state. That means astronauts wouldn't adapt cleanly in either direction. Their bodies would exist in a permanent biological compromise, never fully adjusting, always deteriorating. This may actually be worse than zero gravity. On the International Space Station, the body adapts to weightlessness and we counteract the damage with intense exercise. On Mars, the partial gravity may not be sufficient to stop bone loss while still introducing stresses that microgravity does not. We don't know because no human has ever lived in partial gravity for months or years. That unknown is the most dangerous part. Mars missions would be biological experiments with no control group and no reset button. The risk isn't that the body fails immediately. It's that it fails slowly, invisibly, until one day it can't recover. Technology can be upgraded, rockets can be redesigned, but the human body carries constraints that cannot be patched, and space exploits every one of them. When people imagine a Mars mission, they picture exceptional individuals, the best of the best, calm under pressure, highly trained, emotionally resilient. The assumption is that psychological limits can be overcome by selecting better humans. That belief is comforting. It's also wrong. The problem isn't weakness, it's environment. Human psychology evolved in constant contact with other people, changing scenery, natural light, and immediate feedback from the world. A Mars mission strips nearly all of that away. Months of confinement inside a small sealed volume. No fresh air, no weather, no silence that isn't artificial, no privacy that's truly private. Even routine becomes oppressive when nothing ever changes. Then there's sensory deprivation. No colors beyond metal and screens, no unfamiliar faces, no spontaneous experiences. Studies show that the brain begins to degrade when stimulation drops too low. Mood disorders increase, sleep cycles fragment, motivation collapses, small irritations become major conflicts because there's nowhere to escape them. Interpersonal breakdown is not a hypothetical risk. We've seen it repeatedly in analog environments. Submarine crews, even elite military ones, experience rising tension, irritability, and emotional blunting during long patrols. Antarctic researchers report depression, paranoia, memory problems, and social withdrawal during winter isolation. These are among the most psychologically resilient people on Earth, operating in carefully controlled environments with decades of institutional experience behind them. Mars is worse. A submarine can surface. Antarctica still has delayed but real communication, physical rescue options, and the knowledge that Earth is physically reachable. On Mars, none of that exists. Communication delays of up to 20 minutes eliminate conversation. Every message is a monologue sent into the past. Emotional support arrives long after it's needed. This creates forced autonomy. Astronauts must make decisions alone, knowing that mistakes cannot be undone and guidance cannot arrive in time. That level of responsibility is psychologically crushing over long periods. The brain was not built to operate indefinitely under irreversible consequence, and no simulation on Earth can reproduce this. Mars analog habitats always have an exit. Even if it's locked, the crew knows it can be opened. They know rescue exists. On Mars, the isolation is permanent by physics, not policy. You can't train your way out of that knowledge. The hero astronaut myth assumes that courage scales indefinitely. It doesn't. Psychology breaks not because people are weak, but because environments exceed what the human mind can sustain. Mars is such an environment. The danger isn't panic or drama, it's slow psychological erosion, unnoticed until performance degrades beyond recovery. And once that happens, there is no mission control to intervene. There is only silence, distance, and the irreversible weight of being truly alone. Every human space mission in history has depended on a quiet assumption that help exists somewhere outside the spacecraft. Even during Apollo, that assumption held. Supplies could be sent. Abort paths existed. On the International Space Station, it is fundamental. The ISS survives not because its systems are perfect, but because Earth is close enough to forgive imperfection. Mars removes that forgiveness entirely. To survive on a Mars mission, life support must function as a closed loop. Air must be recycled continuously. Carbon dioxide removed, oxygen regenerated, water purified and reused over and over again, waste processed safely, food grown or preserved for years without resupply. Nothing can be wasted and nothing can fail. On the ISS, these systems already exist and they already break. Pumps fail, filters clog, valves stick, microbes grow where they shouldn't. When something goes wrong, spare parts arrive on the next cargo launch. Astronauts can jury-rig solutions knowing replacement hardware is weeks away. The system works because Earth is effectively part of the machine. On Mars, Earth is not part of the loop. A Mars crew would launch with everything they will ever have. Every filter, every seal, every circuit board, every nutrient packet must last the entire mission. If a critical component fails in a way that cannot be repaired, there is no backup shipment. There is no emergency launch. There is no second chance. This is what makes life support such a brutal constraint. These systems don't fail dramatically. They degrade slowly, quietly. A slightly less efficient scrubber, a small leak in water recovery, a microbial imbalance in food production. Each issue might be manageable on its own. Over years, they compound. Food is an especially fragile link. Growing plants in space is possible, but it requires stable lighting, precise nutrient balance, controlled humidity, and constant monitoring. A crop failure on Earth is an inconvenience. On Mars, it's starvation, and even stored food degrades over time under radiation exposure. Redundancy helps, but redundancy adds mass, complexity, and more points of failure. Every backup system must also be maintained, tested, and trusted. Complexity itself becomes a risk. The hard truth is this: we have never operated a fully closed life support system for humans over multi-year periods without external input. Not in space, not on Earth. Biosphere experiments have repeatedly shown how difficult it is to maintain equilibrium even under controlled conditions. Mars demands perfection in a domain where perfection has never existed. One critical failure doesn't shorten the mission, it ends lives. Life support isn't just another subsystem, it is the mission. And on Mars, it must work flawlessly, forever, with no one coming to help. Getting to Mars is difficult. Landing there is worse, much worse. This is where the idea that we can just land a rocket finally collapses under physics. Mars sits in an engineering dead zone. Its atmosphere is thick enough to create enormous heat during entry, but too thin to slow a large spacecraft safely. On Earth, we use atmosphere and parachutes. On the Moon, we use engines in a vacuum. Mars allows neither approach to work cleanly. As a spacecraft hits the Martian atmosphere at interplanetary speeds, friction generates extreme heat. That demands a massive heat shield. But after the heat shield does its job, the atmosphere still isn't dense enough to provide meaningful drag for heavy vehicles. Parachutes help, but only briefly and only for light payloads. Beyond a certain mass, parachutes become useless. They simply cannot generate enough force. This is why every Mars lander you've ever seen is small. Rovers, probes, science instruments, even the large successful landings weigh only a few tons. Humans change that equation completely. A crewed lander must carry people, life support, radiation shielding, ascent fuel, and structural reinforcement. That pushes mass into a range we have never landed on Mars. The proposed solution is supersonic retropropulsion, firing rocket engines while still moving faster than the speed of sound to slow down the descent. In theory, it works. In practice, it introduces violent instability, extreme fuel demands, and aerodynamic chaos. Engines firing into supersonic airflow can interfere with the vehicle's control, heat shield performance, and structural integrity. We have tested pieces of this concept. We have never proven it at human scale. Then there's precision. A human mission can't afford rough landings. It needs to touch down near pre-positioned supplies in safe terrain with minimal structural stress. Mars' atmosphere makes targeting less predictable. Winds, dust storms, and variable density add uncertainty that compounds with vehicle mass. And landing is only half the problem. Humans must leave Mars again. That means launching from the surface with enough fuel to reach orbit and rendezvous. Every kilogram of ascent fuel must also be landed safely. The mass spiral continues. Here's the uncomfortable fact. No human-class spacecraft has ever landed on Mars. Not even close. Every proposal relies on technologies that remain unproven at the required scale. Mars is easy to reach in theory. It is brutally difficult to arrive intact. Until we solve landing at mass, Mars remains not a destination, but a wall. Mars is often described as a backup plan, a second home, a place we can go if Earth becomes uninhabitable. That idea is emotionally powerful and scientifically misleading. Mars is not a spare Earth waiting to be activated. It is an actively hostile environment that barely tolerates machines, let alone humans. The most fundamental problem is protection. Mars has no global magnetosphere. Its magnetic field collapsed billions of years ago, and with it went the planet's ability to shield its surface from radiation. Without that protection, the atmosphere was slowly stripped away by solar wind. What remains is thin, unstable, and useless for human life. Standing on Mars, you are exposed to space radiation almost as directly as you would be in orbit. Then there is the soil. Martian regolith contains perchlorates, toxic chemicals that interfere with human metabolism and thyroid function. They are dangerous to ingest and corrosive to equipment. Growing food in Martian soil would require extensive processing, isolation, and constant monitoring. This is not farming. It's chemistry under hazard conditions. Temperature adds another layer of brutality. Mars is cold, not seasonally cold, structurally cold. Average surface temperatures hover around minus 60 degrees Celsius. Nights can plunge far lower. Liquid water cannot exist on the surface without pressurization and heating. Every habitat must be sealed, insulated, powered, and maintained indefinitely. One structural breach isn't a setback, it's a fatal event. Mars also experiences global dust storms that can last for months. These storms block sunlight, reducing solar power and lowering temperatures even further. Fine dust penetrates seals, damages machinery, and coats everything. On Earth, storms pass and systems recover. On Mars, a prolonged loss of power can cascade into total failure. This is where terraforming is often invoked. As if it were a realistic solution, it isn't. Creating a breathable atmosphere, restoring a magnetic field, warming the planet, and stabilizing climate would take centuries at minimum, likely longer. It would require technologies, energy sources, and planetary-scale engineering we do not possess and may never develop. Terraforming is a thought experiment, not a plan. Most importantly, Mars offers no self-sustaining safety net. Everything humans need must be manufactured, recycled, and defended against failure at all times. Earth supports life automatically. Mars must be fought constantly just to remain survivable. Calling Mars a backup Earth misunderstands both planets. Earth is resilient, Mars is fragile, and humans on Mars would be the most fragile system of all. When people talk about exploring Mars, they often picture humans planting flags and building habitats, but the quiet truth is that every real success on Mars so far has been achieved without a single human present. The reason is not a lack of courage or ambition. It's that Mars is an environment optimized for machines, not biology. Robots do not need air, they do not need water, they do not need food, sleep, or protection from boredom, loneliness, or fear. They do not care about radiation slowly damaging their cells because they have no cells to damage. What is lethal to a human is often just background noise to a machine. Consider longevity. The Mars rovers were never designed to last decades. Spirit was planned for 90 days, and operated for over 6 years. Opportunity lasted nearly 15 years. Curiosity and Perseverance are still operating far beyond their original missions. They survived dust storms, temperature swings, radiation, and mechanical wear that would quickly kill or disable a human crew. And they did it without rescue, without resupply, and without returning home. Robotic missions also remove the most fragile system in spaceflight: life support. No closed-loop air recycling, no water purification that must never fail, no food growth systems that have to work perfectly for years. Every human added to a mission multiplies complexity and risk. Robots simplify the equation instead of destabilizing it. Then there is decision-making. Mars is far away. Communication delays range from several minutes to nearly half an hour round trip. Humans on Earth cannot joystick a rover in real time, but robots do not need constant instruction. They can pause, analyze, wait, and continue. They don't panic. They don't make emotional mistakes. They don't break down under stress. This leads to an uncomfortable conclusion. The problem with Mars is not that we haven't tried hard enough to send humans. It's that Mars does not want humans there at all. Every biological requirement becomes a liability. Every human weakness becomes a mission-critical risk. That does not mean Mars exploration is failing. In fact, it is succeeding remarkably well. We are mapping the planet, analyzing its chemistry, searching for ancient life, and preparing future missions, all without putting a single human in danger. Mars may still be explored, studied, and understood, but the explorers best suited for the job do not breathe, do not sleep, and do not dream. Mars, at least for now, is a world where machines thrive and where humans remain visitors in theory, not in practice. Every decade, the story repeats itself. Mars is 10 years away, again and again. New rockets, new roadmaps, new timelines that quietly slide forward as the old ones expire. This isn't accidental, it's structural. Mars survives as a promise because promises are powerful. They attract funding, they inspire engineers, they justify space budgets and political coalitions. Saying we're going to Mars soon sounds bold, visionary, and optimistic. Saying we don't yet know how to keep humans alive there does not. One message opens wallets and imaginations. The other forces uncomfortable honesty. There is also a cultural reason. Mars sits at the edge of human mythology. It represents progress, destiny, and expansion. The next chapter after the moon. For scientists, it's a grand challenge. For politicians, it's a legacy project. For companies, it's a future market. None of those narratives require Mars to be actually reachable right now. They only require it to remain just out of reach. This is why timelines keep moving, not because engineers are lying, but because reality keeps intruding. Radiation does not care about ambition. Human biology does not respond to motivation. Physics does not negotiate. Each time we push deeper into the problem, we discover that the limits are not logistical, they are fundamental. And this is where the Mars conversation mirrors the moon landing debate. When something feels impossible, the instinct is to assume deception or incompetence. But impossibility does not mean fake. It means the challenge is colliding with boundaries we don't like acknowledging. The moon was reachable because exposure was brief and risk was narrowly contained. Mars is different. It stretches those risks beyond what the human body can endure. So we keep saying soon because not yet feels like failure. But it isn't. It's a diagnosis. Mars is not exposing a lack of courage, intelligence, or vision. It is exposing the limits of flesh, chemistry, and time. In that sense, Mars is not a destination, it's a mirror. It reflects back what humanity can and cannot survive. Not yet, maybe not for a long time. And understanding that truth may be more important than planting a flag, because real progress begins when we stop confusing inspiration with inevitability. Mars isn't a lie and it isn't a failure, but it's also not inevitable. It's a reminder that ambition alone doesn't override biology and physics. If this changed how you think about space exploration, subscribe for more deep explanations like this and comment below. Do you think humans will ever truly live on Mars, or is it a robotic future?